He was 37 years old. He had just been crowned the most valuable player of the entire National Football League. He was 12 days away from playing in the Super Bowl, and in less than 3 hours of game time, everything he had spent 14 years building would be destroyed. Not by a better opponent, not by a career-ending injury, but by a system, a decision, a trade that handed his former coach to the enemy and turned the biggest game of his life into a trap he never saw coming. His name is Rich Gannon, and what happened to him in Super Bowl XXXVII remains one of the most disturbing outcomes in championship history. But this story is not just about one game. It is about a man who was told no for 12 consecutive years, a man who was discarded by 4 franchises before the age of 34, a man who clawed his way to the absolute peak of professional football only to watch his legacy get hijacked in a single night. The NFL does not tell this story anymore, and by the time you understand why, you will be furious. This is the truth they buried. Richard Joseph Gannon entered this world on December 20th, 1965 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was not born into privilege. He was not handed opportunities. Everything Rich Gannon ever received, he earned through obsession. He played college football at the University of Delaware, not a powerhouse program, not a recruiting factory, a small school where scouts rarely visited and television cameras never appeared. While future NFL stars competed under stadium lights at prestigious universities, Gannon developed his craft in near anonymity. But what he lacked in exposure, he compensated for with preparation. He studied film like a man possessed. He memorized defensive schemes. He analyzed his own weaknesses with brutal honesty. In 1987, the New England Patriots selected him in the 4th round of the NFL draft. Gannon believed his moment had finally arrived. He was wrong. What happened next was not a setback, it was a pattern. The Patriots never gave him a real chance. They saw a backup, a clipboard holder, a body to fill a roster spot during practice. Gannon watched from the sideline as other quarterbacks received the opportunities he had earned. He was traded to the Minnesota Vikings. For 5 years, he remained trapped in quarterback limbo. He would start a handful of games, flash moments of brilliance, then find himself benched for someone else. The Vikings never believed in him. They never committed. Most fans do not realize this. Rich Gannon spent the prime years of his career begging for a chance that never came. In 1993, he signed with the Washington Redskins. A fresh start, a new beginning. He played in 3 games. 3. After 6 years of waiting. After 6 years of preparation, 3 games. The pattern continued. By 1995, Gannon signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was nearly 30 years old. In NFL terms, his window was closing rapidly. For 4 seasons, he competed for playing time. He led game-winning drives. He demonstrated leadership. He proved he could perform under pressure. The Chiefs still did not trust him. By 1999, Rich Gannon had spent 12 years in professional football without ever being named a permanent starting quarterback. 12 years of being told he was not good enough. 12 years of watching younger, flashier players receive the chances he deserved. And here is where most stories end. Here is where most players accept defeat and fade into obscurity. But Rich Gannon was not most players. In the spring of 1999, the Oakland Raiders made a phone call that would change NFL history. Their new head coach was a young, intense perfectionist named John Gruden, and Gruden saw something in Gannon that 12 years of the league had somehow missed. He saw elite intelligence. He saw processing speed that rivaled anyone in the sport. He saw a quarterback who had been sharpened by adversity rather than broken by it. Gruden made Gannon a promise. Come to Oakland, win the starting job, and I will design an offense around your strengths. At 34 years old, Rich Gannon became the starting quarterback of the Oakland Raiders. What happened next defied every expectation the football world had ever placed upon him. In his first season, Gannon led the Raiders to a 12-4 record. He was selected to the Pro Bowl for the first time in his 13-year career. A man discarded by 4 franchises was suddenly one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But this is where the story turns uncomfortable. The success was not just about Gannon. It was about the system Gruden built around him. Every play, every audible, every hot read. Gruden installed an offense specifically designed for Gannon's quick release and sharp decision-making. The quarterback memorized every detail. The coach knew every tendency. Together, they created something dangerous. In 2000, Gannon returned to the Pro Bowl. In 2001, he made it again, 3 consecutive Pro Bowl selections after the age of 34. The Raiders transformed from pretenders into legitimate championship contenders. And then came 2002, the season that should have immortalized Rich Gannon forever. What happened instead was something the NFL has never fully addressed. The numbers from 2002 still demand attention. Rich Gannon threw for 4,689 yards. He completed 67.6% of his passes. He threw 26 touchdowns against only 10 interceptions. He posted a passer rating of 97.3. At 37 years old, Rich Gannon was named the most valuable player of the National Football League. Let that satisfactorily register. A journeyman quarterback, a man rejected by half the league, a player who did not become a full-time starter until his mid-30s. Standing on stage, holding the MVP trophy, being celebrated as the single best player in professional football. This was not luck. This was not a fluke. This was 14 years of preparation meeting opportunity. The Raiders finished that season with an 11-5 record. They destroyed the New York Jets in the divisional round. They demolished the Tennessee Titans in the AFC Championship game. Rich Gannon was going to the Super Bowl. But there was a problem. A massive, systemic problem that the league had created and refused to acknowledge. John Gruden was no longer coaching the Raiders. During the offseason, Oakland had traded Gruden to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The architect of the Raiders' offense, the man who had installed every play, every signal, every audible, he was now standing on the opposite sideline. And the Raiders had made a decision that would haunt Rich Gannon for the rest of his life. They did not significantly change their offensive system. What happened next is something the NFL never likes to discuss. January 26, 2003, Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego, California. Super Bowl XXXVII. The Oakland Raiders versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. On paper, this should have been competitive. The Raiders possessed one of the most explosive offenses in the league. They had the reigning MVP at quarterback. They had weapons at every position. But the circumstances surrounding this game created an imbalance that professional sports should never allow. John Gruden had spent years installing the Raiders' offensive system. He knew every play call. He knew every audible. He knew the specific signals Gannon used to communicate with his receivers. He knew the protection schemes. He knew the hot reads. He knew the tendencies that Gannon himself had developed under his coaching. And the Raiders organization, despite having months to prepare, did not adequately adjust. This was not Gruden cheating. He used knowledge he had legitimately acquired. But the NFL had approved a trade that placed a coach against the exact system he had created, with the same quarterback running the same plays he had designed. The competitive integrity of that Super Bowl was compromised before the opening kickoff. Most fans still do not realize this.
From the very first snap, something was catastrophically wrong. The Buccaneers' defense anticipated throws before Gannon released the ball. They jumped routes with timing that seemed impossible. They disguised coverages that exploited the exact weaknesses Gruden had identified during his years in Oakland. Rich Gannon threw 5 interceptions that night. 5. 3 of them were returned for touchdowns. The Buccaneers scored 21 points directly off turnovers. The final score was 48-21. It was not a competitive football game. It was a systematic dismantling. But here is what the highlight reels never show. Watch the footage closely. Watch Gannon's face as the game progresses. You will see confusion. You will see desperation. You will see the slow, agonizing realization of a man who understands that he is fighting an opponent who knows his every move before he makes it. This was not a quarterback playing poorly. This was a quarterback trapped inside a system that his opponent had built, and the blame fell entirely on his shoulders. The cameras captured his final expression as the game ended. That image became the defining memory of his career. Not the MVP trophy, not the Pro Bowl selections, not the incredible 14-year journey from nobody to champion. Just those 5 interceptions. Just that scoreboard. Just that humiliating defeat. The football world delivered its verdict immediately, and it was merciless. Professional sports punishes losers without mercy, especially losers who fail on the biggest stage. After Super Bowl XXXVII, Rich Gannon became a symbol of collapse. Sports commentators questioned whether his MVP season had been legitimate. Analysts suggested he had been exposed. Fans who had celebrated his resilience now mocked his destruction. Nobody asked the obvious questions. Why did the Raiders not change their offensive system? Why did the NFL allow a coach to face the exact team he had just left, running the exact plays he had installed? Why was the blame placed entirely on the quarterback instead of the organization that failed to adapt? Those questions were never seriously examined. The narrative was simpler. Gannon choked. Case closed. He returned for the 2003 season, determined to prove that the Super Bowl was an anomaly. But 14 years of punishment had taken their toll. His neck required surgery. The quick release had slowed. The processing speed had dulled. Rich Gannon retired in 2005. He walked away with 4 Pro Bowl selections, 1 MVP award, and a Super Bowl memory that overshadowed everything else. And the NFL moved on. Quickly, quietly, conveniently. Here is what the league does not want you to understand. Rich Gannon's story exposes a systemic failure that professional football has never addressed. The NFL approved a trade that created an inherently unfair Super Bowl matchup. The Raiders organization failed to protect their MVP quarterback by refusing to meaningfully alter their offensive system. And when the predictable outcome occurred, the player absorbed all the blame, while the decision-makers faced no accountability. This is not about attacking John Gruden. He coached brilliantly. He used every advantage available to him. That is his job. This is about a system that allowed the circumstances to exist in the first place. This is about an organization that sent its MVP into the biggest game of his life, using plays that his opponent had literally designed. And this is about a league that buried the story because the truth was too uncomfortable to discuss. Rich Gannon spent 12 years being told he was not good enough. He defied every expectation. He reached the absolute peak, and when he arrived at the summit, the ground beneath him had already been rigged to collapse. The Super Bowl loss does not erase his MVP season. It does not invalidate his 4 Pro Bowl selections. It does not diminish the remarkable transformation from unwanted backup to league champion. But you would never know that from listening to the NFL. Today, Rich Gannon works as a football analyst. He breaks down games with the same intensity he once brought to the field. He rarely discusses Super Bowl XXXVII in detail.
Every February, when championship retrospectives air, his story is conveniently absent. The 2002 MVP is treated as a footnote. The journey that inspired millions is reduced to a single humiliating night. But the questions remain. Was it fair to judge a quarterback's entire legacy on one game? Was it appropriate to place total blame on a player while ignoring the organizational failures that surrounded him? Was Super Bowl XXXVII a legitimate championship or a predetermined outcome disguised as competition? The NFL decided the answers quickly. History recorded the verdict without debate. But history does not always get it right. Rich Gannon gave 14 years of his life to professional football. He refused to quit when everyone demanded he disappear. He proved that persistence can overcome prejudice, that age is just a number, that a man discarded by the world can still reach the mountaintop. And when he finally arrived, the system that should have celebrated him instead ensured his destruction. If this story made you think, I need you to do something right now. Hit the like button. It costs nothing, but it tells the algorithm that content like this deserves to reach more people. Subscribe if you have not already. We uncover the stories that professional sports tries to bury, the forgotten legends, the uncomfortable truths, the narratives that deserve examination. And drop a comment below, because I want to know what you actually believe. Was Rich Gannon exposed as a fraud on the biggest stage of his life, or was Super Bowl XXXVII the most unfair championship matchup in NFL history? The debate is yours. Thank you for staying until the end. I will see you in the next one.